Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining. We're just going to take a few minutes while people start to join. It always takes a minute for people to join through Zoom, and I'm sure there are people just finishing, gate duty or so on, getting ready to join. But thanks very much for coming. My name is Murray. I'm the founder of Tassomai. I'm joined today by Cara Steele, who is head of science, I believe head of science at Marple Hall School, Manchester.
I'm curriculum leader, so I don't want to.
Curriculum lead, sorry.
Yes, we've got a department head, and then we've got a middle leadership team. So I'm part of that middle leadership team in science.
My apologies. We're just today going to be talking a little bit about what we're calling the sort of the Tassomai triangle. That is where the school, and parents, and Tassomai kind of join together, and particularly to get Cara's insights into how that's been working at her school, and tips and ideas from her. I'll just, by way of introduction, Cara has been using Tassomai for about 4 years now, been curriculum leader for 4.5 years and teaching for 9. Where we got involved with Marple Hall School was when they wanted to overhaul homework in around 2019, and they looked at what options were out there and took on Tassomai, and they've been one of our top users ever since. I'm going to hand over to Cara, so maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit more and tell us a bit about your school and your context so that people listening can see where they line up with that.
Yeah, of course. So we are a really large secondary school in Stockport, which is in part of Greater Manchester. We're an 11 to 16 school, and we pull from a really wide sort of catchment area. We've got over 1,500 pupils, so we use Tassomai at Key Stage 4, so over 300 pupils per year group at Key Stage 4. We have a low percentage of PP students in comparison to the sort of national average. And the percentage of SEND students is around the national average. And we have a really, really low percentage of EAL students. Our sort of EAL students will be in single digits pretty much within any given year group. So, but we do have a wide catchment area that we pull from. And originally, when I started as a curriculum leader, sort of 4.5 years ago, my big thing was homework. I took on a sort of projects around homework, and part of that was to, put Tassomai into place.
Thank you very much. We'll start maybe with that. What we want to get onto a little bit is around the implementation and how, I suppose what's unusual about Marple Hall is the size. You say 300 per cohort is unusually large. To talk a little bit about how implementation in the school for homework and then working with parents and supporting homework at home is kind of going to be what we would like to focus on. But we probably should start really with your school and Tassomai and the product. So when you were looking to overhaul homework, you came to us. I mean, you must have, I guess, looked around at various options. What was it about this product that seemed to suit what your requirements were?
Well, sort of initially, we came across Tassomai because I think one of the members of SLT had seen something about it at a Pixel conference. So it had initially come from us being part of Pixel. And then we'd done a bit more research on it. I'd done a bit of research. We'd spoken to some other schools that were using Tassomai. So I spoke to somebody that had spoken at a Pixel conference about using Tassomai in science, spoke to them about how they used it in their school. I just emailed him and set up a call with him. But really what sort of persuaded us with Tassomai, we tried it out with a small group of students first. We kind of soft launched it with a specific group of students just before COVID, really. It was in 2019. And we saw the impact that it was having. And also, obviously, we looked at the data and the kind of promise of Tassomai, the impact that it could have on the progress of the students. And that looked really good. But also, we have a real culture of retrieval within the department. And that was something that is very strong now, but we were really trying to build at that time. And Tassomai fit really, really well with that, that culture that we were trying to build of retrieval and showing students how retrieval practice worked really well. And so the algorithm with Tassomai and having that constant retrieval, we thought would work really well with what we wanted to be as a department, really.
Fantastic. I mean, it sounds as though the groundwork was already set, given you had that culture of retrieval. So presumably, it wasn't too much of a hard sell to say to your team and to the students in the school, this is what we're using from now on. You didn't have to kind of like educate them in the concept of retrieval or the importance, or were there some challenges along the way, implementation wise?
I think from a department point of view, the department were really on board with retrieval. We'd already kind of laid the groundwork that we did retrieval at the start of every single lesson anyway. We saw the importance of it. We saw the impact that it had on the students and what they were able to remember. So in terms of selling Tassomai to the department, that wasn't too difficult. It seemed like, everybody was willing to give it a go and to try it out and see what kind of an impact it would have. Obviously, in terms of selling it to the students, the majority of students are really happy to try something, especially when they think it's going to have an impact on their outcomes at the end of year 11. But there's always challenges in that with any homework, I think, with some students anyway. And especially a new thing, because you've got the challenges of, the kind of admin side of it. How do we log on and all that kind of stuff, and just having something new to do is always going to be a bit of a challenge. But also just selling it to them as something that they had to do regularly, because it wasn't just, they do the science homework and they can forget about it. It's actually a bit easier now because you've got the fractional daily goals, but at the time they didn't have that. So they had to actually remember to go and do it 3 or 4 times a week. And for some students, that was a real challenge. So it was definitely a harder sell to the students than it was to the department.
Yeah, that's interesting. The pacing of daily goals has been a big issue in our heads for a long time because I'm quite draconian and I'm like, you have to log in every day and do it separately every day because that's, from the cognitive science side of things, that's going to be more
Yeah.
beneficial. But we realized, of course, the people who were most missing out were maybe those students who weren't quite so engaged, weren't quite so organized. And we realized, and from feedback, we kind of found out once a student has missed 3 days or something, they know they can't then get it
That's it, they
done.
give up.
So
Yeah.
why bother at all? A detention is a detention. So that's why we started to soften the rules. I still want to do something about it. I'm trying my best to encourage people to spread the work.
Yeah.
And the incentives are there in the app, but I can imagine you see like low usage and then someday a big spike. You were
Yeah.
mentioning before we
And I
started
think you're
Monday
right
night.
that those students that are going to struggle to do it and remember to do it 3 or 4 times a week, they're always going to be the ones that you see them do it on a Sunday night. But then at least they can do their homework. But the ones that kind of are doing it regularly are always going to do it regularly. They're the ones that are a bit more sort of organised with the homework anyway. So I don't think it really affects those students, but I think it gives a more chance for the ones that are maybe not as organised to do it.
Right. And we talk all the time in kind of the design product side, like we want to create means for people to succeed on this
Yeah.
app rather than like barriers to go, no, you failed.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's really interesting to hear. Sorry to pick up on that, which wasn't part of the agenda, but this kind of really fascinates me about where our designs in our little ivory tower meet like the reality of implementation, which maybe brings us on to the parent side of things. It sounds like at Marple Hall you have really good, you're really well set up for this kind of use. You'd identified homework as a major thing that you wanted to focus on, and you had this kind of retrieval culture already. At what point did you start to bring parents on board with Tasmaya, and was that something that was you felt was important from the outset, and you made it a priority, or is it something that kind of crept in over time?
No, really, from right at the beginning, we realised that parents were going to be the sort of big key to making everything work, because we've got such a massive cohort of students. So we need parental buy-in. We cannot be chasing up 330 students. We needed parents on board as well. And I think no matter how big your school is, that parental engagement is really important. So we did that from right at the beginning. When we sort of hard launched Tassomai with the year 10s and year 11s, we started off by I sent out an email to all parents. We've got a quite good system at school that allows us to easily communicate with parents of specific classes or whole year groups and things like that. So I started out where I would send a letter actually to parents, like an attachment to an email, and telling them what Tassomai was, why it worked, the kind of the algorithm and the sort of why retrieval was so good. So we gave them a bit of background information on it, explained what the homework would be, like the homework requirement for the students would be. told them about the weekly reports for parents, and said that they would automatically be signed up to a weekly report unless they told us that they didn't want that, and gave them sort of an opportunity to contact us if they wanted to about it, to ask any questions. So that was the sort of initial communication to parents, and that still happens every year. We still do that with every year 10 group that comes on board. We send out a whole cohort message to parents about it. And then also throughout the year, we really encourage the class teachers, because they sort of take, after that initial launch, they really take ownership of their own classes on there. And we really encourage them to keep parents up to date. Obviously, they get the parental reports every week anyway, but we really encourage teachers to kind of keep parents up to date if there are any issues that might come up, or if, you know, the students are doing really good things on there as well. And we often will get parents emailing us to ask us about Tassomai. If they've noticed something in the parental report, they will contact us. So it was really something from right at the beginning that we thought we had to get right, really, because we've got, as a school, we've got quite an engaged parental, or engaged parents, sorry, anyway. So we thought we really needed to harness that to make it work well for us.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you've done an amazing job on that side of things, in terms of kind of building that community with parents. I wonder, you know, what from your position, you know, in curriculum lead and so on, what is the what do you see as the purpose of engaging with parents? Is this around, is the way of thinking that parental engagement directly has an impact on outcomes? Is it about kind of addressing attainment gap issues? Or is it a kind of thing that helps to offset teacher workload, or is it kind of combination of all of these things? What do you
I think it's
feel?
probably a combination of all of them. I think the kind of obvious thing is, if the parents are well aware of what the student is expected to do, and they can see how much they're doing on there, because they can have a look at you know, how often they're logging on and all that kind of stuff. So that immediately they're able to see whether they're doing the homework or not. We have a homework system where we kind of set the homework that parents can log on to as well, so they can see what homework the student is being set on a weekly basis. So that's the sort of first thing. It just drives more engagement, I think, from the students when they've got somebody at home saying to them, have you done your Tassomai today? Or, do you know what, you can just do it in the car on the way home, or whatever it might be. But then I think the other thing is that parents really like is that they're really able to see where the gaps are sometimes in the knowledge as well. So they can look at the Tassomai tree, they can look at the you know, the strengths and weaknesses in terms of the topics that they're doing well. If we print off the Tassomai reports for the students, the parents will often see that as well. So I think it also helps them to address those kind of gaps in knowledge, so that if they can see that, they might say to their child, oh, you know, I noticed that you've done really well on this thing, or maybe we should focus on this, maybe, you know, you're going to do a bit of revision on that. So I think it really helps to engage them in that part of it as well, because I think by the time a student gets to Key Stage 4, parents really want this kind of information. They want to know a lot of information really about what that child is doing in school and how they can help them. Most parents just really want to help their children to do better and to achieve, you know, whatever they're capable of at the end of their GCSEs. So I think this really helps, without putting extra workload on a teacher, for parents to have all of that information there, so that they can address those issues themselves at home as well.
It's really gratifying to hear you say things like this, because this was really kind of the core of what went into the thinking that why I built Tassomai in the first place. You know, and we were talking just before we started that after I left from teaching in the classroom, I did a bit of tutoring, and so often what you come across when you go into somebody's home to work with their kid on something, the parent goes, "Well, I'd love to help, but I don't know anything about such and such." I was like, well, if that's the barrier to you helping your child, and you're spending, you know, more money probably than most people can afford on getting this help, if we could just provide you with the information and you could sit with your child, you know, it would make a big difference. So I'm so delighted to hear you say that kind of thing, about how it's maybe helping. But one of the things I'm worried about, and I think about a lot at the moment, is there are some families who have the time or the inclination or the, you know, the background themselves, you know, in education, where they're like, right, I'm going to take this tool and run with it. I'm going to help my child, be really supportive. And there are others who, sure, they want to be supportive, but then maybe not as engaged. They don't maybe have the digital access or the time or the inclination in terms of like maybe they don't feel like they can support through an app like this. Do you have any kind of approach to kind of drive engagement more with parents who are less engaged, or is it more a kind of triaging thing that you can see, right, these are the families where we need to get more involved with? I mean, how do you handle that kind of differential
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously, we do have parents that are less engaged with it for a multitude of reasons.
Mm.
And that initially would be picked up hopefully by the classroom teacher, whoever the teacher is that checks the Tassomai. So we might find that a student's not as engaged in it, and that might be because that's not being sort of driven at home. And then that hopefully is picked up in that way. We do have sort of a number of interventions. So we have all of our year 11s sit there, any any sanctions, not just homework sanctions, sit any sanctions after school in a computer room. So they have access to computers to be able to do their homework after school in there if they need to. And we also have something with year 10s on a Monday afternoon. So we finish school early on a Monday and we have CPD, it's like teacher CPD time in the afternoon. But if year 10 students have a sanction on a Monday afternoon, we'll go and grab them. Another curriculum leader will go and take them and put them in a computer room, and they can do their homework in there if they need to. There are homework clubs in school as well where the students can go. And it might just be actually that the class teacher just needs to have a conversation with them to kind of make them see how important Tassomai is and the homework is. And also we kind of hope that those students, if they are less engaged for whatever reason, that they kind of have that intrinsic motivation that they can see the impact that Tassomai has, even if they've only had a bit of a go at it, even if maybe they've only done it in our initial launch lesson that we always do. We have a computer room lesson at the start of every year with all year 10 and year 11 classes. Even that just in that short space of time, they see that some of the stuff from Tassomai, they actually remember it in a lesson. And it sometimes only takes that really small thing to happen where they think, oh, hang on, I remember that because I did that on Tassomai last week. And then that gives them a bit of their own motivation to carry on doing it as well. And if we do have any sort of particular issues with a class, even if I've got a class, in fact, I did it before Christmas, where I had 3 or 4 students in the class that just weren't engaging very well with Tassomai, and I had all kinds of excuses about logging in. I take them all into a computer room, make sure they can all log on, show them how to do it, show them, what kind of things they're doing on there, how they choose the quizzes, and try and make it a bit more sort of a bit more fun for them in that lesson, and then just hope that they're going to keep doing that. And then I know that they can all log on and I know that they can all do it. But we do have opportunities in school for them to do it if they don't have access to the technology or they don't have internet or something like that.
Yeah, well, we look at a lot of data on a sort of from where we sit, and it's clear seeing the level of implementation, the quality of implementation that you have at your school is really admirable. So you're clearly doing a lot right, and I mean we should talk a little bit about results, but I, I was going to say, you've kind of you mentioned before about kind of launching Tassomai each year to parents, and that point I think is something that a lot of people, including myself, we overlook. Like, oh, a school's new, let's launch it, let's do the big fanfare, and then year 2, year 3, it's just sort of in the background, and it can start to sort of just become part of the furniture. This idea of relaunching each year and reintroducing everyone is, I think, a really powerful one. That's a takeaway I'm going to take myself. Incidentally, anyone listening and watching this webinar, if you want to do a launch for parents and you want us to get involved, we have people who are dedicated to like help support implementation. So we can do webinars like this school by school and for parents. And we also have our parent club. So as soon as a parent opens their parent report, they can join the parent club, and then that's free. And then they get access to more kind of directly parent focused webinars. So I'm not sure how many of your students' parents are doing that, but I'm sure quite a lot of them. But we were going to talk a little bit about a little bit more about buy-in and how and why you're sustaining it. You mentioned when we talked before about student voice, and it's just interesting hearing you talk about students who maybe they might not buy into it right away, but then they get that light bulb moment of like, oh, I know this because I've learned it on Tassomai. Is that something you use continually, sort of student voice survey, to kind of help justify to students how they feel about it? How do you use these tools in school?
Yeah, so when we first did a student voice, actually, I was really shocked by the data that we got out, because I suppose you kind of tune into the sort of more negative voices in the classroom sometimes and hear the students and maybe moan a bit about Tassomai. But it was really overwhelming in terms of that students found that Tassomai was really, really valuable. And what I took away from that is that we needed to, rather than focusing on those kind of negative voices, but foster that culture within the classroom as well, where Tassomai is the norm and everybody thinks that it is really useful. So picking up on a comment, if a student says, oh yeah, I remember that because I did it on Tassomai, and really making a bit of a thing of that within the classroom. But yeah, we found that when we have done student voices on it, that students actually value it more than we thought they did. On the whole, and they can really see the value in it as well, that they see that retrieval. As I said, we start every lesson off with retrieval practice, so it gives a really good opportunity for students to remember the stuff that they've done on Tassomai. We hope that it all links together,
Yeah.
that's why we do it, and that they can actually see the benefit of it as well with that
And
retrieval at the start of the lesson. Yeah.
and you've done, I think when you sort of kicked off, you did teacher voice surveys as well to get
Yeah.
feedback from them. Uh, was that important for kind of buy-in and kind of like a cohesive approach? And did you learn a lot from teacher voice when you
Yeah,
launched?
the teacher voice was actually really interesting, because what was quite clear from it was that teachers didn't necessarily feel the ownership that we as a middle leadership team thought they did feel for Tassomai. And it kind of allowed me to make some changes in terms of um, the way we did it, really. So I kind of put a bit more ownership back on the teachers, and that is something I know one of the questions that we'll maybe talk about later is something that we might do differently if we did it again. But that's definitely something that I thought maybe I didn't give them enough ownership of it at first, in that, you know, their class is their class and they know their classes much better than I know their classes. So maybe, you know, the initial communications shouldn't have all come from me. And a lot of, initially when we first started, a lot of the communication to parents and to students came from me centrally. But actually now it's mostly done by classroom teachers. And I know when we talk about rewards, I mean, that is all led by classroom teachers, really. Now they choose what's best for their classes. But the teacher voice really showed us that the teachers didn't feel the ownership that we thought they should feel for Tassomai. And that wasn't that they weren't interested in it. They were, and they wanted to do really well. I think I just kind of taken that away from them a bit, because I am, you know, I am a bit of a control freak sometimes. I like things to be how I want them to be. So I maybe just didn't give them the opportunity to have that ownership of it. It was something that I realised when we did the teacher voice.
Well, I think for various reasons, I don't know, probably not that various reasons. It's a very common situation that you get somebody kind of owning Taskmai and doing all the work, all the running of it, and the teachers in between them and the students are sometimes a little disenfranchised. And whenever I talk to people in that position, they kind of say, "Well, you know, I know how it works, and it's better if it's driven centrally." But I've really loved hearing a bit about how you've sort of changed the culture that the teachers are involved. So you mentioned earlier that teachers are communicating with parents more about the Taskmai data and so on. But you also just hinted at kind of rewards and sanctions. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how teachers are using rewards around Taskmai, and that's kind of what's the education term, devolved, if you like, to
Yeah, so we we've tried all sorts of things for Tassomai rewards. So we've done stickers, and we use the Tassomai postcards. We still get Tassomai postcards printed, and teachers can use those just whenever they want. They just get a bit of a stash of them, and they can choose whoever they give them to. And the idea is that we want to make sure that teachers are every week checking for their classes. We don't want it to be really onerous. We're not trying to give anybody extra work. Obviously, we're all sort of, we've all got, you know, a heavy workload, but just making teachers realise how quick it is just to check really easily what the students did last week, picking up on any that maybe aren't doing it correctly, or where their accuracy is very low, or if they've just not done the homework, then they would get a sanction for that. but then equally rewarding the ones that are doing everything right. So what we've actually found is that small rewards seem to work best. So we tried vouchers, big, quite high value vouchers, maybe 25, £50 vouchers, as like a draw thing, where if you did so many daily goals within a month and things like that. And actually, what the students really like is normally quite small chocolate rewards work pretty well, chocolate and sweets and things like that. So normally before Christmas, we'll buy a load of like £1, I don't know if they are £1 now, selection boxes.
Yeah.
And the teacher, each class teacher just gets sort of 6 of those per class. So that'll be the 6 weeks leading up to Christmas. And they can open them up, and so they'll have like 5 really small chocolate things to give out to their class. And how they decide to do that is completely up to them. So if I've got a class that's not engaging very well with Tassomai, it might just be that if you do your homework, if you do your 3 or 4 daily goals for that week, then you go in the draw to win some chocolate. Or if you've got a class where they all do it and they're all really engaged in it, maybe it's on accuracy, or maybe it's on how many questions you've answered, but it can be up to the teacher. So they decide what works for their class, what they're going to be most motivated by, in terms of what they get the reward for. And it's completely up to them how they do it, really. So we give them the rewards, and we ask teachers what is working best in terms of the rewards that we're giving out. But we find that small things that don't cost a huge amount of money work the best, and we let the teachers decide how they divvy them out.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of kind of making it more kind of spread across the department. I don't know whether you're using it, and for anyone in the audience listening now or on the recording, if you want to do this kind of thing without, you're worried about the kind of the workload of setting this up, we do these weekly data drops, and I'm sure most people are using the leaderboards and the engagement drop. On the leaderboards data drop, I built a raffle, and credit to I should credit Mangotsfield School in Bristol, who we visited. We were talking about exactly this issue a couple of years ago, that they wanted to do prize draws for who's done the most questions. The problem was the same people were always at the top of the leaderboard, and that's why we built this like raffle sheet. It works on a year group basis or a whole school basis, but we could easily customize it if anyone wants to do it class by class. But what's nice about that is every daily goal you do is like a ticket in the raffle. So you can win the prize even if you've done one. But obviously, you're much more likely to do it if you've done 5 or 6 or 7. I'm not sure whether that's a mechanism you're using or you've got other ways of doing it. But I really like where you're saying if engagement's high, now we look to accuracy and so on. And anyone who's worried with low engagement in their school, I would start by doing prizes based on days active, because that's super accessible. Everyone can get day active, log in and do a question, and then move to daily goals, and then move to questions and points. It's really nice to hear it's being done in the classroom level. I feel like I should customize your raffle leaderboard so it's easier for your team.
Yeah, I didn't. So we've never used that, because I look at I've used the data drops and I look at the data drops, but we never used a raffle because it was a whole year group, I think. And I actually do a lot of the time when I do it for my class, that however many daily goals you've got, that's how many times your name goes into the sort of Wheel of Fortune. So yeah, if we do it by class basis, that'd be perfect, actually.
Well, this is exactly how the raffle works on our sheet, except you can choose points and then points or whatever. I will get onto your sheet and make it filterable by form. That's semi-easily done, but that's my idea of fun, so I'll happily do that. Going back to the parent side of things, so you talked about student voice and teacher voice, and you've mentioned how some parents are kind of then coming back to the school saying, "I've noticed this." Do you get the impression that parents at large feel like Tassomai is something that's like important and efficacious, and is it a challenge to kind of get across to parents that this is like the right way of doing revision, or is it just sort of seen as a kind of background homework tool that they're not that invested in?
No, I think on the whole, actually, parents are really invested in it, because we make that clear to parents that we think it's really important and we think it really works. So I think, yeah, we do get parents emailing us if, say, they've noticed they've not had a parental report or something's not working very well, or they've noticed that their child has not done their Tassomai, maybe they might contact us. But equally, we would have Tassomai would be part of a conversation at every single year 10 and year 11 parents evening. So we would expect every teacher to mention Tassomai in some capacity at parents evening. And when you have those conversations, it's very clear for the most part that the parents really value Tassomai as well. And you only have to mention it, and they know about it, and they know a lot of the time they'll have seen it, and they'll know, you can have a good conversation about it. And actually, what's really nice is that most of the time you're not telling them anything they don't already know. So if I say, oh, such and such a body isn't doing the Tassomai as much as I would like them to, or they're not as engaged with it, or they're doing really well on it, actually the parents normally know that, and they are in agreement with you, and they've already picked up on that before you mention it.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And just to follow up on what you said there, for anyone who's not that familiar with the parent side of the app, Cara's already mentioned a couple of times that they get this sort of weekly report email. In fact, the report email is just a kind of reminder. They click that link to get to their dashboard. They can actually look at that dashboard anytime they like. And not only does it give the same stuff you have as a teacher that says how much work's been done, but it lists for the parents these 3 topic areas in this subject are where they could do a little extra work, and that's based on the answers they've given in the last week. So they can have a video or a bite-sized article similar to kind of look at with their child, and that's what we're trying to develop as a way of giving resources to parents who maybe don't know the curriculum themselves that well. So it's really nice to hear you're kind of getting that level of feedback from them. Sort of coming towards the end of our time, and thank you so much for giving us your time, Cara, today. We've got a couple more questions, but also anyone who wants to ask a question to Cara, please do put it in the Q&A. I'm not looking at the right screen, so I can't see whether there are questions yet, but please do add questions, and we'll come to them. We're also joined by my colleague Sam, who can maybe answer any questions in the app if you've got them. But we've sort of, it's been so good to hear about how at Marple School the implementation has been done so fantastically and professionally, and you've got this culture that meant it was going to succeed well. I guess not everyone's as lucky, and we've all been involved with schools where it's more of an uphill struggle to get that implementation successfully. Would you have advice for teachers who's trying to introduce it into their school, maybe not yet seeing that kind of buy-in, and it's maybe a bit of an uphill struggle? Any advice for them as to how to drive engagement and get more value out of a program like this?
Yeah, I think really, well, the first thing is don't give up, because it's hard, especially at first. It's really hard to launch something like this with a lot of students, whether you're doing it with 1 year group or you're doing it with 5-year groups, and things go wrong, and students don't want extra homework, so it can be difficult at first. So definitely keep going with it and persevere. I think it's really important to get, if you can do, sort of everybody in the school on board. You'd be hard pushed to find really anybody, even teachers in other departments in our school, that haven't heard of Tassomai and don't know that students do Tassomai as part of their science homework. It's part of our sort of everyday culture within the school. And that doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time to sort of build that within the school. But especially within the pastoral teams that we have at Key Stage 4, they're really aware of what the homework expectations are. They know how students log into Tassomai, if there are any issues like that when they go to the head of year. We have everybody on board. We have massive SLT buy into it, and that's really important, that you've got that support of everyone around you, really. And then also obviously parental engagement as well. So it really is an approach where you need everybody's buy into it, and that can take time. But if you sort of persevere and keep going with it, I think that's really the key to making it work properly.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll reiterate, we're really keen to support schools on their implementation. We are all educators at this company as well. We're not kind of just like making a software and thinking about other stuff. We really want to make sure it's used well and is valued in the school. So anything we can do to support with implementation, with helping launch to parents, or work with teachers to kind of help them get more of an understanding of how it works. Anything we can do, just get in touch, because we're really keen to put the time and effort in.
I know that, sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah, please.
when we launched it with parents, the letter that we used came from something that I got from the Tassomai website a long time ago, actually, when we first sort of started it, which I'm sure it's all still there now. But we do still use the launch video when we do that with students. We show them the video, we use the Tassomai presentation, and we show students that, and we've kind of adapted it to include how they log on, and we do that all within a lesson. And we have this sort of email or letter that we send out to parents. But I'm more than happy to share that with you. I can send you the letter that we send to parents. It's not.
That's
There's
really
no magic
appreciated.
with it at all. It's pretty, bog standard. Tells them what they need to know about it, really.
No, I really appreciate that, and thank you for reminding me as well. I think what you're referring to is what we call the teacher hub, which if you log in as a teacher, it's down there in the corner. You can even just type in the URL. You don't have to be logged in to get to the teacher hub, but it's we try and keep that full of useful resources and how-to videos. We mentioned leaderboards. There's a tour of the leaderboards and things like that. But launch presentations, letters, and we might, if you're happy to share it, we might steal your letter and put that
That's
up
fine.
there. We always try our best to keep that up to date. Obviously, the product's always evolving. We're just about to launch this quite nice feature for sort of teacher set class tasks like specific homeworks and things. So we try and keep the resources up to date as well. So that's a really good place to look if you're looking for inspiration on implementation. Yeah, there's a lot there. If you would, you mentioned actually earlier as well, if you were going to, if you hadn't used Tassomai, but knowing what you know now and you were going to launch it now, would you approach anything differently? You talked a little bit about teacher buy-in and sort of top-down management, but how would you, with hindsight, sort of launch Tassomai if you were starting at a new school?
Yeah, I think in terms of the way we launch it, I would probably keep that more or less the same in terms of the way we launch it with students and the way we launch it with parents. But I think I would probably take not a massively different approach with the department, but a slightly different approach where I would give them a bit more ownership from the beginning, and get them doing a bit more of the kind of speaking to parents about it from right at the beginning, because you know you have we have a department with quite a lot of teachers. It's a big department with a lot of teachers, and it almost seems easier sometimes for you to just do it yourself in terms of a time saving kind of thing. But obviously we've got a department of people who really want the best outcomes for their students. They're really invested. They will really give anything a go that we ask them to do. So really, I feel like I should have maybe given them a bit more of that ownership from right at the beginning. And I don't think it, made a huge difference overall. We were able to do that staff voice and sort of fix any of those slight issues that we had. But I think that it might have made things a bit easier for all of us really from the beginning, actually.
Yeah, you may well be right, but it also there's maybe what you ended up with is a kind of a middle way that is maybe the secret to your success. That it
Yeah.
launched with really strong leadership. You knew exactly what you wanted to do with it, and then you over
Yeah.
time delegated, and then maybe that's why it's worked so well with your
Yeah.
school.
Yeah, maybe.
Um, but we've identified this same issue around like one person running it all and having that being their life suddenly and the rest of the staff being slightly disenfranchised. And we've been working quite a lot to develop tools specifically for teachers that are going to mean it's more worth their while day to day to log in and hit that button and get
Yeah.
that sort of thing that happens, whether that's a data report or a sort of special homework and that kind of thing. So we're working quite hard to make more of a reason to get colleagues all to join and get invested.
I think making people realise as well how easy it is just to. I mean, I always have Tassomai open on my browser. It's there permanently, and it doesn't mean I'm looking at it all the time. It doesn't take up a lot of time out of my day. But I think if I would maybe make people realise a bit earlier on that it's so easy to check it, and just showing them the quick wins in terms of checking Tassomai, maybe something that I would have done a bit sooner if I kind of was getting to grips with it myself as well, I suppose. But definitely showing them how quick it is just to have a look at it, and how that really can impact the way your class does their Tassomai, when they know that you're always looking at it and it's just a normal thing that you check it on a daily basis.
A cheeky question, but do you or colleagues ever put that dashboard up on the whiteboard, like look at the dots together or trees or anything like that?
Yeah, so I mean, I know definitely some of my other colleagues do, but I will happily, especially when we're doing rewards and things, put the last week up on the leaderboard, on the whiteboard, sorry, to show who's done more or show how many questions they've answered, whatever it is that we're looking at. So, or to look at trees, we put trees up. I do it quite often, where especially somebody's done loads and they've got a really impressive tree for whatever it is. So I'll put that up on the board. So yeah, I definitely do that, and I know I've seen that in other classrooms as well.
Great, that's nice to hear. I was never quite sure how people would feel about it. If it's like, we don't want to name and shame, obviously, and that kind of.
Yeah, I think if there were any sort of big issues within the class, then I might be a bit more wary of it. But usually they're quite interested, and it brings out a bit of a competitive side to some of them as well. So
Right.
some of especially some of the kind of maybe less engaged boys are a bit more willing to give it a go when they see their name slipping down there. So
Yeah, I definitely have heard from schools people like, they're crowding around their, well, maybe they don't have their phones anymore now, rules,
no, not allowed.
looking at phones and kind of teachers coming up and playing, what are you looking at on the phone? Thinking they're going to be looking at TikTok or something, and they're comparing their Tassomai trees to see who's got
Yeah,
the best looking tree is kind of, that's a win. Um,
yeah.
any questions from anyone watching or listening, please do put them in the Q&A. But otherwise, I think, well, we had a couple of other question ideas, but we're slightly running low on time. But is there anything else you'd like to talk about, Cara, maybe before we finish? Or have you
No, I
figured
think we've
out?
covered. I think we've covered most things that we sort of discussed. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Cara. It's been really, really useful and really valuable. And I hope you don't mind. We're going to, share this recording because we had a lot of people
Yeah.
sign up who haven't been able to make it. We'll let them watch this off. What do you call it? Offline, asynchronously. It's the term now, isn't it? So thank you so much for your time. If people get in touch directly and ask to speak to you, can we put them in touch with you if
Yeah, absolutely. More than happy to
that's really
answer
appreciated.
any questions or anything.
We won't inundate you, obviously. Likewise, anyone watching who needs any help from us on implementation, setup, advice, particularly around the parent side of things, we're really happy to help. So just do get in touch. Otherwise, thank you so much for taking the time to watch and listen. Thank you, Cara, so much for taking the time to work with us today. And thank you, Sam, invisibly in the corner for what do you call it? Producing this. If it was a podcast, he'd be our producer. Thanks very much. Bye bye.
Thank you. Cheers.